Hi, I'm Josh Rushing, sitting in for Femi OK, and you are in the stream. Today, crowdsourcing medical solutions. Is it right and just for social media to play a role in the healthcare system? All right, I'm hanging out on set with my friend and colleague, Malika Bilal. Malika, what does the digital community say today?
Well, I am hanging out with them. They have a lot to say, actually. One of the sites that is talking about this is the aggregating site, reddit.com, where one such petition that we'll be talking about today was posted. It got a lot of criticism. It also got some positive feedback. And one of the comments I'd like to share is from SSS. He writes, "When it's a matter of life and death, your loved ones will try to do anything to get that help. Our generation has the advantage of social media. I don't see any detriments to exhausting every possibility to get help." Now, we'll talk about that point of view and others in today's show. But of course, there are so many ways you can share your comments with us. One of those is Google+. Just add the stream to your circle, and you too could be in the stream.
My name is Dr. Susan Love. I am a survivor of leukemia and a breast cancer surgeon, and I'm in the stream.
Well, they're all over Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Every day, it seems like there are new online petitions calling for action. And many are from families who want to pressure the government or drug companies to intervene on behalf of sick loved ones. But these social media campaigns are raising serious questions among bioethicists. Is it survival of the fittest or the socially savvy? And is it right for social media to play such a major role in medicine? Joining us to help answer some of these questions, in New York, Arthur Kaplan, a bioethicist at NYU Medical Center, and in London, Suzanne White, a criminal negligence lawyer. And in California, Keith Knapp, whose wife Michaela has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Also in London, Liz Scarf, social media director for the Saatchi Bill, an effort that encourages medical innovation. All right, welcome everyone. I'd like to begin with you, Keith. You and your wife started an online campaign in order to gain access to new cancer drugs not yet on the market. Can you walk us through your fight?
Yeah, so my wife was diagnosed back in October of 2013 with kidney cancer, very advanced, a rare subtype. Over the next 6 months, we tried out all the FDA-approved options. When we got to the end of the road, we started looking into clinical trials, and we found that there's this drug in clinical trials that's leaps and bounds better than anything we've tried up to this point, at least in the early data. And we've been trying to get access to that through the clinical trials unsuccessfully due to a variety of reasons. And basically, we're just at the point now where we're trying to get access to that drug under a FDA policy called compassionate use. And in the past, petitions like the one that we started at the beginning of March have been successful. So, you know, we just put it up online. And over the past month, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's quite gone viral yet, but it has taken off. And, you know, it's gotten us into discussions with the pharmaceutical companies we're trying to get the drug from, and our congressmen and people like that. So we feel like things are going in the right direction, and we're hoping that, you know, our exposure today on the show will help us keep that going forward.
Keith, give me just a bit about Michaela. Tell me about who she is and your relationship with her.
Oh yeah, Michaela is the love of my life. You know, we've been dating since high school, since we were 15. We're 25 now, so you know that's a decade of our lives, pretty much our whole adult life. So I'm sure you know everyone can understand why why I would be willing to throw every last effort I can into getting her this drug. You know, just any prospect of saving her from this is just having that prospect of a miracle is something that people in our situation latch onto. And since we started our petition, we've had, you know, thousands of people sending me emails about times they were in similar situations. And just, you know, when your loved one is laying in a bed, you know, the cancer is growing inside of them and you don't have any FDA approved options to give them. It's devastating. So it's great that we're having this discussion today.
Arthur, what would you do to save the love of your life? Would you start an online petition?
Absolutely, and I fully understand why Keith is doing that, and I think anybody could understand and hope that they would get access to whatever life preserver might be out there. That said, there are issues, as you pointed out, Josh. You've got some people just don't know how to use social media, so their cases, if that's going to be the tool for getting public opinion behind them, they're not going to be very good at it. I have met people who are private and don't want to do it. I also have met people who just aren't particularly media-genic, attractive in terms of being on social media or any media. They don't speak clearly. They may be older. They may have hurt themselves. They may have tried to commit suicide and damage themselves, and then they're looking for some drug or some medical device or a face transplant, and they're not the most appealing people. So social media is certainly a tool. It's not one that necessarily works equitably for everyone. The other issue, I don't know what Keith's obstacles have been, is you can go online, you can try to compel a company to give you a drug, but sometimes the company says, yeah, and who's going to pay for this? So when we hear about compassionate use, trying to get somebody emergency access, sometimes people need money. They just need money to help pay for whatever it is that they're trying to get.
Arthur, would you advise Keith to not do what he's doing?
Absolutely not. I would say push hard, but those kinds of campaigns, let's put it another way, Josh. If Keith has 4 more people behind him and they all say, could the stream feature us? At some point you won't, because you'll run out of interest in those kinds of stories. So if you're at the tail end, is what I'm saying, sometimes you're not going to do as well as the people who are at the front end. That to me means we need a system to help get people compassionate use, both in the U.S. and in other countries. For now, though, yeah, I think he's doing absolutely the right thing.
And it's interesting, you say that, Keith, just 1 second, because I wanted to pull in this from online where people are actually sharing their own stories with us. This is from Norma on Twitter. She says, I have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and breast cancer, and I feel that patients have the right to try medical drugs. Cancer, she says, take away the freedom of choice. It's their life and their choice. So Keith, that leads us to this video comment from a registered nurse, and she has opinions. I'd like to hear what you think of what she has to say. Have a listen to this.
Doctors and hospitals shouldn't be pressured by crowdsourcing because they're the ones who are there for the patients, understanding all of the risks that a trial drug may do to a patient. And without that actual support from physicians or hospitals, then a patient could take a risk by taking a drug that's on trial without getting that full support that they need to actually be cared for while they're going through this treatment that may not be approved.
So she mentions that patients may not have the full support of doctors, but to be able to get to be eligible for compassionate use, you have to have the support of an oncologist, correct?
Yes, and I think this is an important point to make because I've been on other shows where we've had these discussions and people assume that our doctors are not backing us up on this, when actually our doctor, our oncologist, is the reason why we found out about this drug in the first place. We would love if our doctor could, decide to set up a compassionate use arrangement for us for this drug, but our doctor can't. And we went to a clinical trial and she said, you're not going to get into my trial, but you need this drug. And she actually told us about petitions that have been successful in the past, and that's where we got the whole inspiration for this. So to me, I think that it's important that people understand that doctors are just as helpless as us when it comes to getting the drugs that their patients need sometimes.
And that's quite interesting actually from a UK perspective as well, because that's what we're being told by patients and doctors in their thousands.
Hey, Liz, can you begin? Liz just jumped in the conversation there. Liz represents the SACHI bill. Can you set the SACHI bill up for our audience, what it is and why you believe it's needed?
Sure. So the SACHI bill, the formal name for the SACHI bill is the Medical Innovation Bill. And it's designed to help medical doctors to innovate new treatments and cures safely and responsibly for cancer and other diseases with the consent of the patient. So it will codify the existing law and it will set in place a process for doctors to follow in the event that a patient wants to, or the doctor feels that there's a treatment that falls outside of standard procedure that could be effective.
So this law was put forward by Lord Saatchi, whose wife, who's a novelist, died, I believe, of ovarian cancer. That kind of spurred him into doing this. I think it's kind of interesting that you announced the law on Google Plus, and it has an online campaign to include, if you look at my computer, there is a petition on change.org, which is exactly what we're talking about in the U.S. that using these kind of petitions to change the medical industry. So even this law over with the Saatchi bill. Now, Suzanne, let me ask you, I know you have some challenges for the idea of the Saatchi bill. What are they?
Well, I've got the unpopular task of trying to explain a very dry bill and how it affects patients and doctors. But firstly, the whole purpose of the bill and the reason why it was brought about was because Lord Saatchi was under the assumption that that doctors were unable to innovate because they would be litigated against, because he keeps saying deviate from the standard procedure. And unfortunately, he doesn't understand the law, because in this country, doctors are judged on what a body of doctors of the same qualification, the same expertise would be due, and if it was reasonable for that doctor to perform an innovative task or use an innovative drug, and a body of doctors supported that, then it's absolutely fine. We have got in the UK, I know that Liz said that Jeremy Hunt supported the bill, but unfortunately it's quite clear that the the professors who are doing the research from the British Medical Association, and in fact the lawyers who defend doctors, say outrightly that they do not think this bill is good for patients and it's not good for doctors. The Medical Defence Unit say there's no reason to fear the consequences of providing innovative treatment. There are appropriate safeguards in place, and doctors are preventing from pushing the boundaries, and the history and current practices show that they do innovate. The law and ethical requirements at present don't present a bar to evolution and innovation, and that's my concern, that firstly the bill is not drafted in a way that actually protects patients, but also it's unclear, and as a result of that in itself will mean that we have to interpret the statute, but also that will lead to litigation and more doctors actually being sued than they would have initially. But how the law is at the moment.
Would you agree that there's a need for doctors to allowed to be more innovative? And is there some kind of happy medium? Is the problem just the way this bill is written? Or?
No. The way the bill's written is that it's consolidating decades of statutes and regulations which effectively protect patients when innovation is happening. But at the same time, I mean, I was giving a lecture to some obstetricians and midwives today, and a doctor said to me, all my pediatric colleagues are using drugs that are unlicensed on patients, neonates, because they're just testing out drugs. No one is going to sue them for trying out innovative drugs, and that's the key thing we need to get across. And the other thing that's really problematic with this bill, and I'd like Liz probably, if she could answer this for me, there's no definition of innovation, so I actually don't know what the bill means, or what actually means by innovation. And if she could just define what that means, then that would be helpful, because the entire bill's based on that.
And Liz, I'm interested to get your answer, in addition, because there's this person on Twitter who pretty much agrees with what Suzanne was just saying. Sean says the Saatchi bill's heart is in the right place, but it seems unbelievably woolly and open to serious abuse. Liz?
Well, first of all, I mean, we've heard those concerns before from the medical negligence lawyers. But what we're hearing overwhelmingly,
and the BMA and the British Medical Association.
Sorry, Suzanne, you've had your opportunity to speak.
No, but it's not just lawyers.
We're hearing in the thousands from doctors, from lawyers, and actually, indeed, the bill was drafted with the input and support of Lord Wolfe, Baroness Butler-Sloss, and if on the medical side, Norman Williams, who's the president of the Royal College of Physicians, actually talks about this lack of innovation and this need for it, and mentions, in that his support for the medical innovation bill.
I'd like to bring the conversation back around to the U.S. Keith, speaking of someone who needs innovation, can you tell us how Michaela is doing now?
Well, she actually got out of the hospital after a 3-week stay this weekend. But just last night, she ended up back in the hospital because she wasn't able to keep food down for 2 days. And I actually just now got a text that they found an obstruction in her intestine. She's not doing well. I'm not really sure what that means, but I'll find out after this.
Arthur, can you make sense of this for us? It seems like this is the needs of the individual versus the needs of society. As a father and so on, I love my wife. There's nothing I wouldn't do to try to save them. How do you put that in the framework of what's good for the greater good?
Well, the battle, Josh, is pretty simple, even though it's a huge, tough ethical problem. These companies, why wouldn't they say yes to Keith? I mean, it sounds crazy. His wife is dying. There's a drug in clinical trials. Shouldn't she have access? And I would argue she should, but the reason some drug companies, big and little, by the way, hesitate is that they're thinking if she dies and she's on our drug, then the regulatory authorities, a little bit like this UK exchange we just heard, are going to hold that against the drug, and that could set us back in getting it to market. So if somebody dies or has an adverse event when they're taking the drug, even if they have kidney cancer like poor Keith's wife does, sometimes the FDA says, uh-oh, they died when taking your drug. You explain that to us, and that can take a while.
Hey, Art, does that create a bias in the company, though, to choose cases where that they think that people can be cured or healed? So it creates a bias against people?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you run your trials, you're not taking the sickest people. You're not necessarily taking the oldest people or those nearest to death. You're trying to take people with a clean case of kidney cancer, let's say, but who don't have other complications, aren't older, don't have other problems. That way, partly you can get a better outcome from your drug. Partly you can see if the drug does cause problems. So you don't really want to take somebody at death's door. That makes it difficult to interpret what is going on when they take this new drug.
Keith, you wanted to respond to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say two things. First of all, people in our situation, you know, we're willing to sign away all right to sue based on the outcome. I'm willing to sign away all right to even talk about, you know, the outcome of this clinical trial of one that we would like to arrange with Merck. So that I don't think that should be as much of a concern. Secondly,
hey, Keith, let me just jump in and say, I know you are, and I know many people in your circumstance would, but we need to get a protection from the FDA that they won't hold that against the company, because I hear what you're saying.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we would be willing to, that's what we're trying to work on right now, is to find out what exactly they're scared of with the FDA so that we can work through our contacts at the FDA to try and find an exemption or some way to shield, you know, the FDA from knowing what happens in this situation. But my second point is that the patients are who we need to be thinking about in this situation. The FDA exists for the patients. The government exists to make sure that to act as an intermediary between us and the big businesses that rely on the roads that we make, the people we educate, the universities and hospitals that we fund. It's the government's job to act as our intermediary in this situation, and they're just not doing an effective job. You know, they're doing the job for the average kidney cancer patient who has, you know, doesn't have a rare subtype. The cancer hasn't advanced to a far degree. And people like us are really shrugged to the side, and it's easy to not care about it until it happens to you, and it's really important to just think about. I just feel like it would be good for everyone to experience this in some way, and I just can't even I can't even convey it.
Right.
But I just feel like the FDA should be doing a better job of doing that.
One other point here, just to follow up what Keith said. It's great that we have social media and you can bring attention to cases and get people behind it and help put pressure for people in Keith's situation and his wife. But we need a better system. The UK is debating what they want to do about innovation. In the US, we need a program as part of our health reform. Remember I said some people can't afford a social media campaign. Some people can't afford a new drug. Some of these little drug companies, they make their new thing. It looks promising. But that's all they've got is one drug. They can't just give it away. They'd bankrupt themselves. So we do need a compassionate use program, I'm going to say, with serious teeth. That's missing in the U.S., this notion of saying, hey, Keith, go out there and beg and see if you can draw enough attention and put enough heat on the big guys so that they'll give you something. That's not a program.
Right, and Arthur, that's actually something that we are hearing from people online who are saying that this is only something that certain people can take advantage of. But I also want to show the view of someone else. Omar tweets in, ethics to a sick man take a secondary place when they're confronted with a possible cure. And Keith, that goes back to what you were saying about taking this back to the patient. But Liz, I want to get you back in here with this comment on Twitter where Yahya writes in, I think it's only fair to free the medical companies of the possibility of punitive damages if we want to have this discussion. So in the UK, the law currently right now, what kind of punitive measures could be taken against doctors should something go wrong?
Well, at the moment, I mean, there is no to sort of also come back to Suzanne's earlier points, I mean, there is no law against innovation. So you're never going to see doctors in court facing a charge of not innovating. But deviating from standard procedure, by definition, leaves a doctor more open to being sued. And ultimately, what the bill is trying to achieve is a culture change, because we've told, for example, a young, recently qualified doctor, Dr. Henrietta Morton King, has told us that in their training, she was told to expect to be sued at least 3 times throughout the course of her career. And so it's the fear of the law that's actually putting up a red light and a stop sign.
I'm sorry, it's complete nonsense. And the trouble with this bill is there's no evidence to substantiate what you're saying about doctors being sued.
We've got thousands and thousands.
Well, I'm sorry, but the Medical Defence Union and the British Medical Association and
hey, Liz, hold on. Let Suzanne finish.
Is necessary.
We've got the Medical Defence Union actually defend doctors against being sued. They say there is never a case they've had, and I haven't had in 18 years, of suing a doctor for innovation. So in terms of saying that doctors are being sued, it's just nonsense, I'm afraid. And also, you've got the test wrong. It's not about deviating from standard procedure. If a doctor deviates from standard procedure, but does so in a responsible manner with the support of a body of doctors, then that is not, they are not going to get sued. And that's the problem with this bill. It's misunderstood. The drafting is not good, and it's going to cause a lot of problems for patients, but also for doctors, because it's unclear. First, you haven't defined innovation, and also because doctors are not going to know what to do, what they can innovate and what they can't. There is going to be a lack of innovation because of the fear that doctors might do something wrong, and that's the problem. The law at the moment is not perfect, but it actually works.
All right, Suzanne. All right, everyone. Actually, we're going to have to hold the conversation here. You definitely want to join us online for our post show, because this is going to continue there. But before we head over there, here are some stories that we're following on Twitter.
We start in India, where the country is kicking off the world's largest election. Polls opened in the general election on Monday and will close in early May. Online, Indians are sharing why they plan to vote using this Google interactive map to express their hopes. Well, in timely fashion, the BJP, a nationalist party, released its manifesto, which circulated quickly using the hashtag BJP Manifesto. Ruling Congress Party supporters discussed similarities with their own manifesto using hashtag Copycat Manifesto. Next, artists are putting a face to drone victims. In Pakistan's northwest frontier province, drone operators will see a large portrait of a victim's face. Using the hashtag #NotABugSplat, the collective hopes to raise awareness and humanize Pakistani civilians. Now to Kenya, where police raided Somali communities following a bombing last week in Nairobi. Many are using hashtag Kasarani concentration camp to discuss those detained at a football stadium. Nomadic tweets, innocent Somalis detained in Kenya and put into cages. Officials say the crackdown is intended to ensure national security. And finally, we continue to fight for our detained colleagues in Egypt, marking 100 days since their arrest. You can join the campaign using hashtag FreeAJStaff. Josh?
You know, I've been really touched by our colleagues at CNN and BBC who have spoken up on behalf of our journalists who are detained.
All around the world, you're right.
Yeah, in Cairo. Makes me feel good as a journalist. All right, well, thanks, Malika. Stay with us. The post show's next at stream.aljazeera.com. And on the next show, Canada's Inuit are on the verge of a food crisis. Do they have to sacrifice their culture to survive? Until then, we'll see you online. All right, welcome back to our post show. Today we've been discussing the ethics behind online petitions for medical intervention. I'd like to go back to Art here, I think. Art, you mentioned in the regular show that there should be a compassionate use program in the U.S., but you'd like to see one that has teeth. Can you tell us what that would look like and how it would be different from what is in place today?
Sure. So I think first we've got to have much better education of doctors and patients with serious diseases to say, here's how you get to the FDA. Here's what the compassionate use program is. We're not spending any money, so if you're lucky and you have a good doc, you get referred to this idea of appealing to the FDA. But if you perhaps are in a different situation with a less well-informed doctor who doesn't know what to do, you don't get access. So we don't want to just rely on petitions online. We want to have a real outreach system. Then if you have costs, the drug company says, well, we only have one drug and we got one vial of it and it cost us $1 million to make it. We can't just give it to you. Then somebody should step forward and say, well, we have a certain pot of money to spend on people in desperate situations. Lastly, it would be very important to have teeth to say, we're going to run these trials. I think it was Keith who said, we need a trial of one. I've proposed that before to the FDA, and all that means in English is we set up a study just for that person. It doesn't adversely impact any other studies that the drug company may be doing. If there's a death, it doesn't count against the standard trial. That would make companies a lot braver to go out and then help folks who don't have time to wait for a whole trial to finish. They're going to die before that happens.
I'd like to share something with our audience. Hold on, Keith. I'm going to show something to our audience on my computer. This is an internet meme that's come up from this issue. It's a picture of a doctor on the phone, and he's saying, I'm sorry we didn't get enough likes in time. Your little boy is going to die. Keith, how many signatures have you gotten on change.org for Michaela? And should the person with the biggest social media footprint get special attention in the medical field?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I completely agree with Dr. Kaplan in the long run. This is, our situation and all the other ones recently here in the States. It's a symptom of a policy issue, but it can't be fixed in time for us. So we looked at the system as it is and decided this is the best way to navigate it. So while I completely agree that in the long run we need to fix this, I honestly wouldn't be too optimistic about it happening in the short term, because healthcare in this country, it'll get wrapped up in some larger issue, and patients will continue to die while they have these petitions posted. So it's very complicated.
Keith, when you're looking at the cost of these experimental drugs, do you have the money to pay for them?
No, but we're getting a large enough online community now. We're at about 400,000, and we're continuing to grow, where we know that we could fundraise if we needed to. That's not a concern to us at this time. I mean, really, getting the company to supply the drug is the first big hurdle. Another point is that, Dr. Kaplan said that it might cost them $1 million to produce this drug. It costs them about $1 billion to get this drug through the FDA, so $1 million is nothing. And honestly, these companies rely so much on the infrastructure that our government builds for them that they can be expected to provide drugs when studies show that they're going to be far more effective than the current drugs on the market.
Do you know how close this drug is to being approved?
Well, Merck has announced that it's the fastest that they're trying to get a drug through FDA approval in the past 20 years.
Is that a matter of months or a matter of years, though? Do you know?
They said it could be within this year or next year, but basically the companies are racing to come out with this drug because it treats a whole range of cancers.
So, by the way, Keith, just one addendum to what I said. I agree with you about the big guys, the Mercks and the Glasgows and the Novartises. They've got the resources if they want to do it. There are a lot of little companies, I've been involved with them firsthand, who really are in the, we don't have much money and our budget's going to run out in 30 days, and if we give this away, our investors are going to go bonkers and tell us not to do it. So that's where, if you're the 6th or 7th fundraising person, you need help. That's why I keep saying, I'm tired of politicians saying, yes, I support the Keiths of this world. Put some money into this. Let's make it fair.
Keith, Merck said no to you already, right?
Yeah, we actually just finally got a response from them last week through our oncologist. They said they're not willing to do compassionate use for this drug.
Did they say why?
Cancer. We're still trying to figure that out. They usually cite concerns about there not being enough supply or them not having a good idea of the dosing schedule. But I've actually heard from scientists at Merck directly, have contacted me and told me that they know from their experience that that's bunk. So we're really trying to get to the heart of the situation so that we can work with the FDA to try and find a way to make this happen.
You know, it's interesting bridging these two discussions here, what's happening in the U.S. And you heard Art say that we need our legislators to put their teeth into it, put their money where their mouths are. Right. It sounds like what people online are saying is what lawmakers in the U.K. are doing with this Saatchi bill. So Suzanne, there is some criticism here, though. I'm going to read this tweet from Mark. He says, the law should protect the most vulnerable. Terminally ill are desperate and they need protection from experiments, he says, and the safeguards in the Saatchi bill are not enough. So Suzanne, you have your own criticisms, of course, of the bill, but moving forward, what would you do differently? How would you help those who are most vulnerable, as Mark says, but changing it in the way you see fit?
Well, the most vulnerable must be protected, of course, and the law at the moment does protect patients from, inappropriate innovation, but also doctors as well. What I will say is that in the UK, the last couple of weeks, a new scheme has been set up called the Access to Early Medicine Scheme. It's very new, but it allows patients who are terminally ill and very, very ill with little prospects of recovery, trying out new innovative drugs that have not as yet been available and have not been authorized. So I think that's a really great step forward. I mean, there's lots of reasons this innovation doesn't go as quickly as we hope. There's funding, there's pharmaceutical companies and what drugs they develop. There's all sorts of issues, but this bill and addressing litigation is just not one of them. It's not going to help. It's just going to muddy the waters, and I don't think it will protect vulnerable patients.
Can I respond to that?
Please do, Liz.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of, it's like I've said before, we have heard the opinion of the medical negligence lawyers, but in response to the tweet, we're very confident that the bill stands strongly against quacks and against snake oil salesmen, and ultimately this bill is about patients. It is about empowering patients. It's about somebody like Keith, in the UK. But the other point to make is that this is a consultation, and the whole point of the consultation is for us to be able to solicit the views of patients, of lawyers, of doctors. And Suzanne actually attended an event that we put on in the House of Lords, which was very much part of that process. And we have also discussed with the Department of Health that after the consultation process has finished, we have had some great feedback from people that we're very grateful for, and that will be fed into to making the bill much stronger and clearer.
Liz, can you give us a timeline on where the bill is in terms of progressing through the process?
Well, the public consultation closes on April the 25th. And after that point, all of the responses, and it's important to note as well that those responses are in many forms. So again, I would agree with Keith, and I would agree with Arthur in the use of social media and online petitions. I mean, that is one communication channel of many for us. So once we have received all of these responses, the Department of Health will analyse all of those results, as will we, and a recommendation will be made from that point.
Just to make one point, Liz, at the House of Lords meeting I went to, everybody who was independent, the British Medical Association, lawyers representing claimants and defendants, all the people at that meeting who had been asked to attend opposed the bill. They had serious reservations about the bill. So there is a real body of people who are clinical researchers who have concern. You haven't got the support of NICE or the BMA and a number of really important bodies, and I think you need to take on board that.
Actually, all of those bodies are going to be responding to the consultation, but they're actually doing that privately. So
all right, hey Liz, I've actually got to stop it there. We're going to wrap the show, but I tell you what, we can continue this conversation. Do it on Twitter and include us in at AJ Stream. Liz and Suzanne, thank you so much for being with us. Art, thank you for being with us. And Keith, all of our best to you and Michaela, and good luck, and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Change.org/save my wife.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, look, on the next show, Canada's Inuit are on the verge of a food crisis. Do they have to sacrifice their culture to survive? Until then, we'll see you online.